And welcome everyone to Beyond the Classroom. We're going to take this hour to explore opportunities for educators kind of outside of the realm of K-12 or kind of your collegiate education space and where that looks like it might show up in the professional business world. So if you can, camera on. I know we might be in webinar mode, so that might not work. Go ahead and turn your mic off if you haven't already. And we're going to be using the chat, a handful of questions. And at any time, any questions you have, please pepper those in the chat. That'll be great. We've got a team here watching and paying attention, so we'll figure that out. All right, so today's goal is we want to explore opportunities in the world of professional learning and development. So what is L&D? How might the skills that you have as an educator transfer to L&D and answer whatever questions you have, hopefully. Do want to make a note, though, this is not like a pre-interview. We've done this before, and maybe there was kind of the impression that this was part of the process. Tier 1 has a real kind of like holistic hiring process, a lot of interviews, a lot of one-on-ones, but this is not part of that. This is just a way we want to just kind of get knowledge out there. We're all educators who've made this transition. This is information we thought might be helpful. So before we get started, we're going to do introductions in just one moment. Hit to the chat here. So what is driving you to explore some of these options outside of the classroom? Just curious to kind of see where you are, what maybe brought you here. And I know obviously there's some simple ones, like it's been a tough couple of years for teachers. We all know that. So we've got some things coming in the chat. Looking for something new, need to change, want to still contribute. Been a rough year, looking for a change. We get that a lot. Retiring and looking to kind of continue. Curious to see ways to use my strengths. Mental health, that's a big one. Get it? Wondering how my skills translate. Great. We're going to be covering a lot of these things, and this is really good. Where my pay is not tied to legislature. Absolutely. I will not lie. When I was leaving the classroom, kind of that like merit-based pay or pay based on what I'm doing, not just on how long I've been here, was something that really spoke to me. So we're going to dive in. We're going to cover kind of a little introduction. What is L&D? What does a week in the life look like? What are your skills and how might you transfer them? And we're going to talk a little bit about Tier 1 and have some Q&A. So we've got Michelle here, and we'll all introduce ourselves in a moment. Recently left education. Jeremy, he's old and salty and crusty. He's been out for 10 plus years. Myself, I'm in my third year outside of the K-12 world, and Zach, who's been out for about 8 years. And we do have Mike Devine on, and we're gonna keep going. But Mike Devine is one of the heads of our learning group, so he might be able to add to some of these questions. You might see him in the chat or so. So, gonna kick it over to Michelle. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. Like Joe just said, I very recently left education. I've been at Tier 1 for less than a year. I taught high school social studies, specifically American government, for about 11 years. And I have my bachelor's and master's in history and a master's in instructional design as well. So one of the things we have here on our introductory slides are some examples of some of the work that we've done that we kind of wanted to show. And so something that Joe and I actually have finished fairly recently is a program for Procter & Gamble and their brand unit. And what was interesting, what was fun about this one is that we got to redesign this in-person training for a post-COVID world. So we got to figure out what was going to be fun, how we could reimagine this, what we could do differently than things have been done in the past, how could we build new connections among people who haven't been able to work in person together for a couple of years. And you can see there, we also had some fun setting up this space and making it look bright and colorful for everyone.
Cool. And then what was your role in the project?
I helped to build facilitator guides, PowerPoints, participant guides, and worked on some of those social engagement pieces to help people kind of feel more connected to each other during their time together in the same space.
Yeah, and we might call it like experience design, but paying attention to the whole, what happens before, during, after, the social moments, what we call like kind of the in-between moments. Mr. GOEBEL.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm the crusty one who's been here for over 10 years, but So happy to be on this call. So I was a Spanish teacher, so taught Spanish for 7 years and have a BA and MA in Spanish. And then while I was teaching, decided I don't think I want to do this forever. So I got an MBA. And then midway through that, oh, we got another Spanish teacher on the call. Awesome. Midway through teaching Spanish, I was like, oh, I think I want to do something else. So got an MBA for fun. And I do love to learn. So that's one thing consulting will give you lots of opportunities to do is learn. So a little bit about this. Another project happens to be a P&G. We have plenty of other clients though. But anyway, this one was focused on creating a learning journey for a certain level of folks in the organization to co-create better. And so what did that look like? It was just a series of moments that we created for these participants. So you can see kind of this little journey here of a couple of workshops, manager meetings, text messages, communications. So all these things we like to stitch together into an experience to drive the performance change we want. And so if you look at the assets below, just different things that I say not just me, but like we as a team built. And the process, we did interviews and focus groups. We had to establish a framework for what does it mean to co-create a P&G. There was some architecture of the solution. And then of course we supported with the delivery and measuring. So anyway, a little bit about me and this project, but so excited to be on this call.
So something that you're going to be hearing throughout here is like these journeys, these experiences. This is, invitations, it's meetings, coaching sessions, all this stuff. One of the big ahas for me when I first came over to the world of learning development was the amount of time and intention that is placed on one event. The event Michelle was talking about was a week-long event. We put 3 months of work into this week-long event. That's kind of one of those big changes that happened. So, all right, hello, my name is Joe JAHNIGEN. I was a music teacher for more than 15 years, was a band director, worked at a performing arts high school, which was great, and had been teaching for a very long time. In my third year at Tier 1, this was a really cool, weird, the word we use is kind of like messy or ambiguous or like a kind of like amorphous project where we weren't quite sure what we were doing when we got with the client, but they wanted us to help them unpack and unscramble this challenge, this problem. So we had some cool, these were virtual design sessions. We started making persona mapping and then eventually that led to the design of this digital document that was kind of tool both for when an expert was working with somebody, this is to find external practices to work with other companies to solve problems internally, but also it could be self-led for someone who's never done this kind of connect and develop work. So we had to be really intuitive. We had to go through rounds and rounds of prototyping to make sure it made sense so people could just open it, click, and make it happen. So not a specific learning journey in as much as it is a one learning tool that will get used by a bunch of people in a bunch of different contexts. And it was really fun to kind of unpack and dissect and figure out what that needed to be. I'm going to pass the mic to Zach here.
Sure thing. Happy to be here, you all. Zach RYLAND, been at Tier 1 for about 8 years now, and I was a former math teacher, mostly secondary, things like Algebra 2, Geometry, Pre-Calculus for about 4 years. I kind of represent not only the semi-crusty state like Jeremy GOEBEL since I've been here for 8 years, but I'm also just a voice of someone who can show the diverse paths that can get into this field, because my undergraduate degrees in psychology, I got into teaching through Teach for America. And so I don't bring the traditional teaching, education, or even kind of instructional design background, which just goes to show a lot of you that bring a lot of different experiences. We can certainly use them as we go forward. Joe, if you can just animate on these 3 images. I kind of put a variety of things up there just so you can see what the day-to-day looks like. That top left is a PowerPoint deck for leadership development that we created. The bottom is a still image from an e-learning course that we built. And the right-hand side is like a much more strategic document, hunting for jobs to be done or pains and gains for participants. So Joe, if you bring on the last piece at the bottom, across the types of work we do, it definitely varies quite a bit. So if you want to see yourself in kind of this field outside of teaching, you could be working on any of those types of things. And from a process standpoint, you might be leading interviews or focus groups. You might be curating data from surveys or kind of running through design sessions with participants to create a new solution going forward. So we'll get into more of that as we go forward in our agenda, but that's a little bit about the 4 of us.
Thanks, everybody. So Zach is going to talk us a little bit, just kind of some level setting on what is L&D? What is learning and development? How does that look like kind of in a high level sense? So Zach?
Yeah, that's right. So this language may be different, especially when I was coming from teaching. If you're coming from a world of academia, you may not be thinking of these phrases the same way we do. So we're trying to answer two of these questions as we go forward. We'll answer what is learning and development, or just how do we define that? And we'll also talk a little bit about what's our role as learning professionals in a learning and development team or department. So Joe, you can take us forward. So that first question, what is learning and development, or what we commonly call L&D? Just kind of the formal definition here. Joe, you can bring it up. So typically this is a sub-function or kind of a partner department from human resources, and it's focused on building out trainings or developmental opportunities to build out skills or to help organizations achieve their goals. So a lot of times in organizations, you find an L&D team maybe doing things like annual compliance training to keep employees up to date, or to keep them within regulations, but you might also find them doing things like leadership development. And since they're in that human resources function as a whole, maybe they're partnering with other individuals to do talent management or overall work on some resources that have to do with performance evaluation. So it really spans the gamut, but it's kind of the learning function inside of a company. Joe, you can keep going forward because that looks totally different on this spectrum, whether you're a small organization or you're working for a really large one. So as you kind of leave teaching, just know that not all learning and development will look the same. If you're in a small organization, a lot of times that means that few individuals wear a lot of different hats. So you might find yourself working as an instructional designer. You might also be creating some visuals for something that you're creating. And then maybe you're even authoring it yourself. Let's say it's an e-learning course. You might be authoring it in a rapid authoring software. So building out a Camtasia or a Storyline course based on the content you've developed as a learning professional. If you're in a large corporation, you're usually a lot more specialized. So that could mean you're specialized to your role, like you purely do instructional design. Could also mean that you're specialized to just focus on one type of work. I only do leadership development, or I only work with this one department. Now, Joe, if you bring up kind of the next animation, if you come to work for a consultancy, which is what Tier 1 does, you could find yourself somewhere in between. Obviously, the ways that consultancies partner with their clients differs. Sometimes we do what we call staff augmentation, or we essentially go and work part of our week for another company, and in which case you're working exactly in their environment the way they do. And other times we're working as those who are thought partners or facilitators of process with our clients. Joe, you can take it forward because there's another small way to think through the large corporation, and just another little bit of a breakdown. A lot of L&D teams structure themselves a little bit differently. So some learning and development departments are centralized, meaning they're kind of like part of the core of the organization, and they are a shared service that goes out and serves different business units or different departments within the company. But some L&D departments are very department specific. So you might work in an organization where you are just tasked with working with one group, one organization. You really get to know that line of business really well. As an example, we're working right now with Kroger and Kroger Health. And so the way their department's structured, if you're a learning and development professional, you might just be targeted to focus on Kroger Health and the pharmacy. Your job is to get to know that area of the business and to serve them best because you're kind of dedicated there. All right, Joe, let's switch over to that other question. What's our role in all of this? So regardless of the size, regardless of the location, in learning and development, we commonly fill 3 key roles. And this is where you'll start to see a lot of your expertise translate over really nicely. A lot of times we could be instructional designers, and that's a role that's focused a lot on the development of new content, on new material. So you might take what a subject matter expert says, distill that information down, and with your background as a learning professional, turn it into bite-sized chunks of information that are right for someone to consume. So that's the instructional design component. We also sometimes sit in the space of learning strategist, and this is called different things in different companies. Sometimes you're a learning consultant, sometimes you're a solution architect, but a learning strategist is really thinking at a level above that. So they might be kind of thinking about, for the business challenge or for the need that a company has, how do we go forward with creating a solution that kind of hits the constraints that we live within and still accomplishes the end goal. So this is almost more like curriculum design if you go just a step higher. And then finally, you might be in the space of trainer and facilitator. And this is the most similar to the stand-up teaching you may or may not do today if you're still in the classroom. But if you enjoy facilitating, you're comfortable in front of an audience, this is a role that might be right for you in L&D. And you might find these different titles as you go out to look for job postings. And of course, within a place like Tier 1, all 3 of these are things that Jeremy, Michelle, and Joe and I do day in and day out. Last caveat here, Joe, you want to add something?
Just with some of we partner with L&D organizations inside other companies all the time. And oftentimes we will work with somebody who solely does one. I am a trainer and facilitator, and I travel from location to location doing these trainings, or I'm the strategist, or I'm a full-time ID. So just, it looks different everywhere you go, but there is an opportunity. If you have a huge passion in one of these areas, you can zoom into one.
That's right. Thanks for that. All right, last but not least, and this is a little bit different just depending on your role today, but trainer and facilitator, we can even put into two categories. Sometimes you'll be a trainer of content. So if I'm going to be doing some leadership development as a facilitator next week, I'm there to deliver content on situational leadership or on thinking strategically. So there, you're kind of playing the role that's very close to what you do in the classroom today. There's also the trainer or facilitator of process. And that, depending on what you're up to today, may look a little bit different, because here you're facilitating a meeting, you're facilitating design sessions, or what Tier 1 would call a D3. Your job is to kind of facilitate the group through activities. But again, it's not for content delivery, it's to accomplish a purpose. Maybe that purpose is brainstorming. So again, as you think about some of these roles in L&D or learning and development, you can start to see how they go down a lot of different paths. And there's really a lot of rich opportunity if you're looking to transition a career from education. Joe, with that, I'll hand it back to you to kind of take us forward. Thanks.
All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about what does this actually look like. If you're a K-12 teacher, you're used to the up very early in the building, and I've got this cadence of kids, break, lunch, duty, kids, plan, break. It's a really predictive, static environment, and it can be amazing at times, but also at times you can yearn for something different. So this is a generic week when people generally get staffed at Tier 1 at the beginning or at other places. You find a project that's kind of a larger project to kind of work and get your footing and learn some skills, right? So we're going to kind of take that into account. So thinking through, you've got maybe on Monday, you've got a team check-in and you're doing some development work. Jeremy put in the chat, development work is writing, it's reading, it's getting comfortable with some content, learning about, let's say it's, safety in the workplace. You're learning about a few things and you're starting to learn and write. Then maybe on Tuesday, you have a meeting with your SME, your subject matter expert. So I'm doing a course right now on digital innovation. So we're working with an organization's, some of their digital innovation experts on what does that mean? What are the skills needed for it? How do you get those skills? What do you do once you have those skills? How do those skills show up in your role? And then obviously more development. Wednesday, you might have a review of that content. So let's say I'm on a team and Jeremy is the strategist and I get done and I hand it off, and he and I are going to talk through the content. He's going to give me his point of view and maybe some things to consider as I'm writing the content. Maybe I'm going to hand it off to creative. Let's say Michelle is my creative designer. One of the things that's different from teaching, where you're a one-person army, we have a giant team. You work with a professional designer to make everything look really good. Thursday, you might have a client review. So on Monday, I kind of came with some ideas. I met with the SME. I'm now reviewing it with them to make sure that they think it's where it needs to be. I'm making some updates. I'm realigning on expectations and direction that we're moving. And then Friday, maybe I finalize some updates. I check my thinking with some others. Hey, here's an idea I have. What do you think about that? Have you done this before? And I start to plan my next week. So it's project centric, I would say. And let's go into a daily schedule. So if we're talking about Tuesday, how does that Tuesday come alive? Now, I might have an hour in the morning to kind of catch up, some prep time. There's a thing that shower thought that bubbled up, and I want to do this, I want to do that. We've got some team meetings. Oftentimes in our organization, team meetings start at the beginning of the week, so you could prepare for the rest of the week. And then this is 3 hours of work time on a project. This might be by myself. This might be with another ID. It might be messaging back and forth kind of on Teams, just to kind of ping and, hey, what are you doing? What do you think about this? But so there's always kind of some constant collaboration. Again, there might be me and a subject matter expert working for an hour, working through some ideas. Hey, here's some thoughts I had. Does this visualize that concept well? Does this simplify that in a way that's digestible and understandable? And maybe there's another project that comes in, or review. And then again, you finish up. But before we go to bed, we've got a 7 o'clock call with China. Doesn't always happen, but this is certainly a thing that does happen. We serve global clients, and oftentimes it's up early because you've got a call with Paris or London, or it's up very early or really late because you've got to jump on a call with Singapore. But these are, typical things that happen with larger organizations. So we're going to talk a little bit about skills and how they might transfer. So what are the skills that you have as a teacher? How might they transfer? And Michelle's going to talk a little bit about her overall journey through this. So in the classroom, when Zach covered this a little bit, curriculum and lesson design becomes learning strategy and instructional design. It's still taking objectives. What do I want my learners to know? And then how am I going to craft some type of experience, activity, interaction that's going to help bring that learning to life. That really is the same. Lesson development becomes instructional design, right? That's bringing the curriculum and lesson to life. Lesson delivery. Now this is facilitation with clients and internal teams, something Zach was talking about before, like your skills facilitating a group. You are likely not going to be in front delivering content. That is not something that happens very often. But what happens all the time is you're up front leading teams, whether it's an internal team, whether it's a client team, or a mix of both. Or like a call I was on at the end of the day today, we're developing a website platform for folks that are going through this. There's a manufacturing site, there's a change initiative. They all have to adopt this security program. And how are we going to design this in such a way that when they get to the website, it just makes sense. It's fully intuitive. I know I scroll here, I need that information, I click there. And so it was a team of 5 of us trying to collaborate at the same time in this highly collaborative environment. It's very much like leading a group of students.
Or even if you work on teacher teams, like I put in the chat just before, if you lead a department team or a grade level team and you've all kind of worked together to figure out how best to serve your students in that area, then it's all pretty similar.
Great timing. Teacher-based teams was our next bullet. Something that both Jeremy and Zach are highly skilled in is this idea of facilitating. Jeremy recently facilitated an internal workshop with like the internal tier 1 leadership. And it's wrangling adults, wrangling children. There's attention spans. There's people that are engaged, and there are people that are not as engaged. There are people that have a lot of opinions and want to add them. But it's also, how do you do that in a way that welcomes new ideas, that gives space for people to be creative, but at the same time drives forward to a goal? This is something Zach often does with, we call these D3 design sessions. It's a lot of fun, but it's a high level of skill needed. Classroom leadership, maybe building leadership, team leadership. That's still the same thing. That's team and client leadership. At Tier 1, we are not. It's a flat organization. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's project centric. So the EM, the engagement manager, is kind of the mini CEO of the project. So that's kind of who you report to. They own that project. So you're constantly leading other teams. So you might be one of those engagement managers on one team, but on another team, you're an instructional designer or a strategist, or just doing internal consulting. But these are just how a lot of these things show up, the skills from your classroom over to the learning world. So a little note here is, consider updating your LinkedIn profile with just some different skills. You can kind of rebrand your own skills. I know when I was going through the transition, I met with a lot of folks to just learn about what they think is valuable and what words are resonating with them, and how to take amazing skills that teachers have and put it in the context of the business world. Because you're kind of like a little mini project manager in your classroom. You've got all these different little students that are all these different little projects that you're trying to touch in with each one and give them what they need. How do you translate that to the world of business? Team, any thoughts on that? We've got some mutes here.
Just a quick question. There was a good question in chat about, are there certain training programs or certifications you recommend before pursuing applying to ID or learning strategist roles?
I've got an answer. Sure, there certainly are. I'm pretty sure on this call, have any of us had formal instructional design training? Oh, you got your master's in instructional design. Nope. I have not. So you certainly could, but I would say I would not let that be a hurdle in your way. The only thing that we don't talk about in this at all, There's another role in L&D that sometimes it's called like interactive development or a RAD, a rapid authoring developer. And those are some of the people that do, it's a blend between like instructional design and creative. And they're the ones that kind of make e-learnings go. It's like a little bit of coding, a little bit of programming, a little bit of design, video editing, and they're kind of packaging that all up together. That is something that you would need more specific training for. And I know Adobe offers certificates. There are other organizations that do that, but that's a great question. All right, moments that don't quite translate. So it's definitely not the same. Moving to the world of professional learning and development is not the same as being in the classroom. And I thought it was important for us to share what isn't there. Observing learner aha moments, that idea of working with somebody and over time, they're like, oh, I get it. And you have that moment where it's like, I reached you. I got to this kid. We made it. Blake, you did it. Those don't happen like that, but there are client and team aha moments. There are times inside of a small project where people do get it, or more than anything, I feel like it's the team all collaborated in a way that we got to somewhere that we wouldn't have gotten to on our own. But there isn't that individual learner journey. Deep relationships with the learner. I know I taught high school. I really liked high school kids. I always got along with high school kids. And my program was juniors and seniors mainly. And I loved those relationships. That's the thing I missed probably the most. But I have got to develop great relationships with my colleagues, people on this call, but also great client relationships. It is fun to, now that we're back out of the COVID world, meet clients for drinks, meet for lunch, meet for coffee, and develop those relationships and get to know folks that I otherwise would never have got to know. But different, but leading a room full of learners. If your passion is that day-to-day getting up and leading that room full of learners, that's not quite the same. You do get to do design facilitation. You do get to do team facilitation. If you are a full-time facilitator, there are people that go from place to facilitate, but it's not the same because you're not developing those relationships where you're seeing the same kids day in and day out. They're growing, you're getting to know them, you're getting to know about their family. That is not something that is quite there. So if that's something that's really your heart is deep into that doesn't quite translate. Daily iteration and testing, that lesson creation and delivery, that idea of when you deliver it, I got this idea, I'm gonna do this lesson, I'm gonna do it first bell, I'm gonna shape it up second bell, third bell, get another crack at it. Like this idea of kind of evolving the lessons over time, that is not there as much. But what you are doing is this team and collaborative design. You are iterating through, you are working with the team, and you are getting different cracks at things over different projects. Hey, I tried this last time and it kind of worked. And I think if I do it this way, it might work a little bit better. I would say the timeline is just much more extended than in the classroom. That daily prep, what did I used to call it? The daily grind of like if you love that, like I've got this predictive schedule, I get up, I do this thing ready, I bring my lunch, I do that. That doesn't really quite happen. You do get the chance to do some longer term projects where you do develop deeper relationships and you are building kind of maybe a pile of documents, a pile of assets, so you get a crack to go through it more than once. But this idea of this like consistent daily prep and that daily schedule does not remain the same. So anything we missed here on this one, team, anybody wants to add to? So the value here is, while there are a lot of skills that translate, a lot of us got into teaching for reasons outside of just the education part. It's the relationships, it's the getting to know folks, it's the helping. If I reach one person, I've really made a difference. That's really important. And if that's one of those key things that's part of why you love teaching, it's something just to consider. So Zach, did you have something to say?
Yeah, Joe, I was just going to say it's kind of a theme behind a couple of these bullets, but the most generic way of saying it is that the immediate satisfaction is less prevalent in learning and development and consulting and the work that we do day to day. But the flip of that is a lot of times we're having a lot larger and more strategic impact. So it's going to take me 6 months till I see the end of my project. I may not actually see the end users or the learners. I may only see it through my client secondhand. But then again, the impact might be for 10,000 people, which, I wasn't able to reach something like that in the classroom. And unless you're an administrator or, teacher, coach, something like that, it's hard to actually see yourself impacting that many people, which is really cool.
And something that we've been doing lately, to Zach's point, is we've been working in with partners who we have trusted relationships with. Hey, we want to be there during the delivery so we can observe and we can what won, what missed, what should we do more of, what do we need to do less of, what was just too complicated, how can we simplify some of this stuff, and then also getting that real-time user feedback. But the challenge is that costs extra money, right? You've got to bill it to the client. Do they want to pay for that? Assessments comes up a lot. People like to ask a lot of questions about assessments. Some clients love assessments and metrics to know whether they did the work and whether the learning that we built met the objectives that they wanted and the business need was solved. Other people don't want those. They don't want to know. I want to do what I was asked to do, and I don't want to measure it. It's interesting. So here we go. We're going to move on to, we've got a handful of questions here. This is Michelle's corner. So Michelle, do you want to just give us a little bit more about your journey? When did you decide that you were going to kind of move out? How did you find out about Tier 1? Just like a little storytelling for us.
Okay, a little storytelling corner. So I was working as kind of an instructional coach in my school. And so that's why I do have that instructional design degree, because I was leaning toward that way in terms of helping and coaching other educators. But the more I did that, the more I was like, you know what, this creation process is really what excites me. I love the kids, love doing what I do, but where I'm getting my energy is not in front of a classroom every day. So in terms of coming to Tier 1, I think a key lesson learned is talking about my skills in a way that translates into the business and consulting world, and understanding and having to pick up very quickly that I have a lot of the skills, I've done a lot of the things, I just haven't talked about them in the same way. Education and learning talk about things in a different way. And so just picking up on that jargon, picking up on that lingo, and in the first couple of weeks, it's like, oh my goodness, I don't know how to do any of this. And then after a couple of weeks, I'm like, oh, I know how to do most of this. I just don't know how to talk about it in the same way. So I think that was a good kind of a way that I was able to feel a little bit more comfortable. What has been fun, and I don't know, I think the question there is, where do you excel? But I do love learning. I love learning about pretty much anything I can get my eyes and ears on. So anything from digging into kind of different science and chemistry to digging into processes in different companies and how they work. It's so much fun that every few months I get to learn about something new, and the door that opens up is something that I would not have had any cause or reason to learn about as a government teacher in the past. And so that's been a really, really fun part of my journey so far.
Michelle, I'm curious, was there, I know I'm going back to a question because this is one I'm just very interested in. Was there anything that you noticed was like, oh, I don't know this and I need to figure it out?
Not anything that was too much of a struggle. I think one thing that's really nice about Tier 1 in particular, and probably about a lot of organizations, but about Tier 1, is everyone is super helpful. So if I just had a question, like, it was really easy to fill those gaps. As a classroom teacher, I was not familiar with too many of the authoring tools for e-learning, that sort of thing. So that might be something you want to look into. But again, we have people that will develop for us. So most of what I had to pick up, what I've had to learn, is how those work enough to create a storyboard that makes sense for someone who is authoring in that tool. So I think that's another thing that I, as someone who like planned my own lessons all the time, I kept a lot of things in my head and didn't write them down step by step, word for word. And now I have to really think through my processes. What actually do I want someone to do? And I'm finding out how ingrained visual and video and like my process is all kind of interconnected. And now that I'm not the one like finding images to use. Like that's somebody else's job. I'm having to kind of pull those pieces apart and rework my own processes.
I would say that was also my biggest struggle was it's not just me anymore. And because of that, I've got to get all the details out. And not only do I have to get all the details out, I have to have a level of conciseness to it so it makes sense. So at first read, people can go like, yeah, I got it. That was definitely a struggle at first getting through. It's just new processes and new ways of working. You've done something for 10 years, you've got to do a new way.
And you've got to get it all out of your head because you're not the one delivering it at the end of the day.
Right, which I think I would say one of the best parts is the deep collaboration. So I have Zach was one of the engagement managers on one of my first projects at Tier 1. And I would just come to him going like, hey, here's where I am. Can I just like read this to you? Is this feeling right? Is this making sense to you? And the idea that was not only an option, but an expectation of like, hey, let's talk this through. Like the Tier 1 lingo there is check my thinking. Can you check my thinking on this? Is this making sense to you? How would you approach this? And you start to find out what people are good at. So something that I go to Zach for is, hey, I'm trying to visually represent this in a real simple way. Is it 3 columns? Is it one model in the center with a bottom and a top? How would you go about this? Like something I go to Jeremy for is just his level of conciseness. He can take a sentence and from this long to this long, and it actually means more. And you start to kind of figure out how to do those things. So I'm going to open this last question up here to Jeremy and to Zach, and then Michelle, you can answer. You'll be last. As a consultant, what classroom-based teaching technique do you find yourself using the most with clients? Not your fellow colleagues, but clients. And I'm going to say Jeremy's got a smile, so I'm going to pick on Jeremy.
I just think, as a teacher, when you deliver a lesson and you nail it, right? And there could have been a model or a framework that was just awesome, that was clear. There could have been an activity that really engaged everyone, and you saw everyone just really into it. And later on, you asked them to do something and they recalled it. They actually like practiced what you taught them. That is the same thing we do for adults in different environments. And so I would say if you know what makes an engaging experience, and that varies depending on the audience, but you dig into who that audience is through some audience analysis, you're going to do those same things. And we do like live events, but we also do like on screen. You've taken plenty of e-learning. What makes a good e-learning? Like what's engaging? So anyway, that's my initial reaction. Like humor, it works in some environments. I try and use humor maybe a little too much, but anyway, humor works in some environments. But also like people bring different skill sets, perspectives to this role. It's just like how do I make this come to life for this audience? Zach, what do you think?
Well, the first joke that came to my mind was, well, do they allow for physical punishments in the school district where you work? Because we could certainly use that with our clients. But realistically, the thing that I find myself doing the most is some version of summarizing, restating, or synthesis, which you probably do in the classroom a lot. You find yourself up there, just to recap, number 1, we talked about this, number 2, that skill, the ability to listen, to distill information, to synthesize that you do so well as a teacher day in and day out, is something that is incredibly useful with our clients, especially as we get into complex conversations when we're really trying to work through something and come to a solution together.
Michelle?
I think Jeremy and Zach have said it really well, but I would also say, like time boxing things is also super helpful with clients, just as helpful with adults as it is with kids. So that's something I do use sometimes as well.
So I'm going to kind of tag on to that idea, that summarize, recap, synthesize. And Michelle, you're talking about, learning new things, love learning. Jeremy said the same thing, love learning, love for learning. It's the idea of just like showing up curious, in a curious kind of state of mind. This, I referenced it earlier, it's this IT security in a manufacturing space. That alone should put you asleep. IT security in the manufacturing, like you should already be done. But the chance to dig in and understand this at a really high level, and it is super interesting. I bring it up with friends. What are you doing? Well, let me tell you about this thing I'm doing with this product supply IT security. Like it is really exciting, and it's really fun to just ask questions, because you show up specifically as an outsider who doesn't know what it is we're talking about. My role is to show up like, I don't know. And let me just ask as many questions as I can so I can learn about this, so I can go, oh, all right, here's how we're going to teach this to somebody who also doesn't know about this. I find that to be very fun and an interesting challenge, and that kind of staying curious. So, all right. We are going to get to some Q&A here in a little bit. Jeremy is going to talk to us a little bit about Tier 1. I know we've talked about L&D in general, but we do want to talk a little bit about Tier 1.
Yeah, I'll keep this brief because I really want to get to more of your questions. But yes, we are celebrating 20 years as a company. So that's very cool. I was employee number 65, and now we're over 300. So we experienced tremendous growth. We are a B Corp, so you can read about that, but it's a commitment to people and the environment, and transparency and accountability. So anyway, you can read about what that means, but different organizations have that. It's not easy to get. But anyway, I would say something very cool that happened in 2016 was we're a private company. We become an ESOP. So that means every person in the company is an owner. So everyone gets shares, and it means we all have skin in the game. And so it's just something that has united us, and really excited about, like, obviously I've been here over 10 years. So I've experienced a personal amount, like, of tremendous growth for me, and then the company as a whole. And I've watched others grow. So even the folks on this call, from a couple years in to Zach 8 years in, like, it's been cool to see them. You start with a project instructional designer, and now leading big engagements. It's very cool. All right, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, just a map of where we are. Yes, we have different offices in different cities. Our clients might be headquartered here, but they're around the globe. So you might have calls with other countries at times, or be partnering with subject matter experts in Europe or Asia or South America, or any number of places. So anyway, just a snapshot of where we are. We have these kind of three big verbs that we say we do. We are a consulting firm. So of course we consult, which, by the way, a great consultant does all the things we've mentioned. They're curious, they're a learner, they listen well, they co-create, they iterate. There's a lot of soft skills in consulting that a lot of teachers naturally have. They also care about serving their clients. So anyway, upfront consulting, let's figure out what the problem is. Designing is architecting some sort of solution. We want people to learn this system at this company. Okay, what is it? How are we going to get them to do that? It's not just a training. There's normally a lot that's involved. We're going to communicate about it. We're going to offer training. We're going to have certain people who are experts in the system that they can refer to. So design the holistic solution, and then we build it. That's building the facilitator guide. That's building the e-learning. That's building the course. So we do all three of these. Sometimes we're more in the build space. Sometimes a client comes and they'll say, I want a 1 hour training on X, and we help build it. Other times it's part of a much broader strategy that the company's trying to activate. So that's just how we activate strategy. Something very cool about Tier 1 that I love talking about is our different disciplines. We have people focused on different things. I am great at creating learning experiences, getting into audience analysis, doing all this stuff. And there are folks with change management. They know how to enable change in an organization, and all that entails. Communications, people who can craft awesome messaging documents. Tech, creative is visual design. We're all creative, but that for us is visual design. We do have a research wing, so we do different proposals for the government and all this stuff. So anyway, you get to collaborate with different people from different disciplines as we build solutions for our clients. We've said this before, you've got to love learning. You might be learning, I don't know what we call it, Paycor. I've done work with Paycor. You're learning about their HR timekeeping system and trying to figure out how that works and train their employees. You could be Harley Davidson, creating an onboarding experience for new hires. You're learning about that. AbbVie, you're learning about the latest drug they're creating and how they want to socialize that or talk about with their employees. Macy's, all these different things. lots of different projects, different clients, and you get to usually balance a couple of these. All right, next slide. Oh, uniquely tier one. Who's talking about this?
Yeah, so it's a mystery. So
Oh.
we kind of wanted to talk about what was exciting about what are we passionate about related to tier one? What kind of helps us get up every morning and get out the door or get down to the basement? So we're going to start off with Michelle.
So I've kind of already said some of this, but tier one's really collaborative. And so Jeremy just talked about all the different spaces where we have people who are experts in areas that I'm not an expert. And so all I have to do is, if I want to learn more about that, I just have to ask questions. Or if I think someone's expertise would really benefit a project that I'm working on, I can just go find them and talk to them and see what they have to say. So there's a lot of opportunities for my personal growth, and then a lot of opportunities just to like figure out what other people are doing and learn about how other parts of the business works.
Cool. And to talk about our next topic, we have Zach.
Yeah, tier one uses what's some of our language, but our operating model, the way we kind of organize the structure internally for tier one is what we call DDA, or dynamically distributed authority. Say that 5 times fast. But it's one of my favorite things about tier one. It keeps us working very autonomously. So you have no manager, you have no direct reports. Everything we do, the structures are based around the projects that we work on. So, my manager in this hour might be Joe, who's kind of running this work, but next meeting, Joe might be reporting to me for something we're doing. So it's very flexible. To Joe's point from earlier, we do a lot of check my thinking. We want people to kind of give us different insights, different viewpoints. But at the end of the day, the other phrase we use is whoever's closest to the situation makes the call. So it doesn't matter if you've been with tier one a week or 10 years. If it's kind of your situation to own, you're the decision maker for it, which is exciting and fun.
Yeah. All right. Me, yay. So own your own career. Yes, tier one is a place for you to show up and say, here's the direction I kind of want to go. Let's see if I can find the work. Something I'm really interested in is what I call scrappy video, kind of that YouTube style video, a way to balance just-in-time need with just the amount of information you need to get the work done. And that's been a little niche I've been able to carve out. If you do well here, people want to work with you. People hear about it and they're like, oh, Michelle's a great example. Early on, she's great. Dude, bring her on for this. Sight unseen. Hey, let's go. Let's try this thing. Jump in. Oh, she did great. Hey, you want to lead the next one? Awesome. How about this next one? It's all about you showing up and doing the work, and you get to do more work. I really like that. And obviously, Mr. Fun himself, Jeremy.
Oh, stop it. You're dang right you can have fun in corporate America. That's what we do. I will tell you this. You will find yourself in environments where they need some light and life and energy, and I try and bring it. And sometimes it's well received and other times not so much, but that's fine too. But it is one of our core values. We have a lot of fun here. Someone mentioned in the chat, we have a lot of passion. We do. Passion helps, fun helps. And we want to create engaging experiences in how we do the work and with the work we do so that they keep coming back for more.
Yeah, well put. So we have this up here. We are also just going to kind of open the floor of the chat for anybody that has any questions. So please go ahead and you can start to populate in the chat there. But if you are interested in continuing the conversation, we do have a tiny URL. I'll see if I can put that in the chat as well. Or you can just go ahead and scan the QR and that'll bring you there. This is specifically for kind of the educators, what we're calling the educators in transition. And it's a unique link so that you're not going to find this on the regular tier one website. For those that are interested, there is like a portfolio component of like, hey, here's some work that I've done. My suggestion there is take that very seriously. Let's see your best work, and it's going to get people are going to read every word. And then there's a series of interviews and things. So would love to see what questions you have about L&D, about roles, about tier one, about the background and Jeremy, behind Jeremy. There's pictures, but they're not on a wall, but they're kind of there.
It happened during COVID. One of these days I'll hang them up.
Yeah. Is there a link where we can find all of that? I I put, what do we mean by all of that? The link that I put in there will get
Oh,
you to this little
Joe, I
URL.
think you
No
just
more.
sent that link to hosts and panelists, so you
Oh,
might
I'm
want
so
to open that
sorry.
up to everyone.
User error. Let's send it to everybody. Sorry about that. There we go. Would a portfolio be required to be considered for a role? Yes, I believe at this point, if you are going to apply. Now, keep in mind, for my portfolio that I put together, I used the lessons that I had created. I used a paper I wrote for my master's. I used
I used a bio for my college alumni magazine.
there you go.
We just want to
Different-
see evidence
different types
of
of
like
writing.
organized thinking, solid writing. So show me a deck you've used in class with some facilitator notes or notes. Show me some lesson plans. It doesn't have to be over the top. Job aids, one pagers, handouts, all that stuff.
Yeah, I would say anything that kind of just what's your quality of work and what do you do? And also, leverage LinkedIn. I know a lot of teachers maybe don't use LinkedIn. That was probably the best tip I got when I was looking for jobs. I actually went from one job in the middle between. I was a classroom. I was actually an instructional coach and consultant for a couple of years before moving to tier one. And I just got to know some tier oneers and just started having conversations and just was having coffee. It's a big change. It's I don't have my summers off. But I also have a much more flexible workday and schedule. There's all kinds of pros and cons. Jordan says, seems like a culture of constant self-development. Yes. What are some ways you've grown in an unexpected or special way? So tier one, how do I say this in a way that's the leadership, the folks at tier one are very tapped into the whole person and the idea that there's a work-life balance, but that you need to be in a psychologically safe environment. There's a level of full inclusion. There's a very contemporary, psychological, inclusive approach that fosters the idea of self-development and fosters the idea of clear feedback, of saying, hey, do you have a second? Quick reaction, quick feedback to how this might get better. Jeremy, early on, I was working with him and I sent an email and I was in a big hurry. And there were like 2 different little weird typos in it. He was like, hey man, just quick piece of feedback. Weird typo. I was like, oh, I was in a hurry. I was buried in projects, but it didn't come off as a way that felt weird or inconsiderate. It was like, we're all owners of this company. We all need to show up really well. Heard it. Thank you. Appreciate that. Good little check there. Does being fluent in Spanish give me a leg up? I don't know. Sure.
Only with GOEBEL. Only if you want to talk Spanish.
Honestly, I think language skills are useful depending on the client, but also pretty much any skill that you have, even if it's like I don't know, I played the tuba on the weekends. There are projects that you never know, like what is going to come up and where that expertise is going to be needed. So I would just make sure to kind of plus up any random skills that you have.
Absolutely.
The good example is that event we were talking about. Emily, who's not on the call, expressed to me in the back channel, like, hey, if they need help setting up, I'd love to go help set up. And so Michelle was there too. It felt very much like prom, right?
Yeah, I set up proms, I set up homecomings, I set up this program. I taught government. I created an e-learning course about how to identify government agencies for a company. Like, who knew?
So this interesting comment about many times there are designated roles that don't allow for others to lead. I would say as an instructional designer and at tier one, when we start, there are plenty of opportunities to lead wherever you are. So if it is one course with a subject matter expert and a client, you're leading that little effort. Then it might be leading internally, like a team of people, or it might be leading the client on like where they need to go. So lots of opportunities to learn and grow. Let's see. Would you consider these roles a mesh between project management and ID? So we do have official project managers who kind of track deliverables, dates, timelines, hours allocated for a project, budget, things like that. As an instructional designer, you're kind of given those things, but you're given a certain freedom. So it's like, hey, you have 40 hours to do X. and it's due by this date. There's a certain freedom there, but I would say you're not doing official project management, at least to start as an ID.
So Jeremy, would you say that an EM is kind of like a ID mixed with the PM a little bit as far as the skill set there?
You just said a lot of acronyms.
I know. The project leader, engagement manager, I feel like is a nice mix of an instructional designer and a project manager. It's like you're leading, learning content, you're developing, but you're also working with the client. You're keeping an eye on timelines. You're checking in with other people. Where are you on this? What support do you need?
Yeah. So I know we're over here, but role progression, you can start as an instructional designer where you're focused on building things, building learning assets. A learning strategist we've talked about kind of oversees instructional designers or sets the pattern. Engagement manager is someone responsible for the overall project. And they also will work on timelines, budget, have those things in mind. So yeah, you can certainly grow into those spaces.
EM, PM, ID, ISD.
Yes, we will. The recording will be available.
And really quickly, somebody did post a question in the actual Q&A space that Michelle responded to, but just to bring it up here out loud in case others were wondering, someone had asked if a master's degree is required. And no, that's absolutely not a requirement of working here with Tier 1 for us. It may be for other job postings, so it depends on what you're looking at, but not a Tier 1.
I want folks who are smart but humble, curious, confident, lots of other things. But yeah, graduate degree is not one of them. Yes, we do have internships.
Mm-hmm. And the remote working, the folks that don't work by a core location is kind of by skill set and specific, experience. But we right now we're all at home after hours, but it's certainly a blended work environment. But we understand the value of connectivity and kind of getting together. Like three of us on the call. Exactly. I don't know if you were there today. I didn't see you, but we were actually at the Covington office. There was a big lunch today and people were kind of hanging out, getting together. So I'm happy to keep going, answering questions.
Well, Joe, I was just going to say, can we take this e-portfolio thing? Because it might be the same person who commented earlier, it might be someone else. I want to be clear, this is not a portfolio in the use of the word. If you're someone who's coming from an art background or, sometimes even like a tech or a design background, we're not asking for a multi-piece portfolio. What will happen as part of the interview process, if you're interested in going forward, is we'll be interested in examples of past work. So that may be one or two pieces. This is not a big kind of selection of things. It doesn't have to span many years, many clients, many modalities. So just in case there's any confusion there, I think that's a big differentiator. We're not looking for you to show up with essentially a folder of things, but part of the process will ask you to submit along with your resume, something you've worked on in the past.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I think I use the word portfolio. I think on the actual application itself, it says just past work examples.
Writing samples, unless they've changed it in the last year. And that's kind of like, I think we just want to see like how your brain works, what your product looks like, and if you can string some sentences together coherently, it's always helpful.
These are great questions. Okay. So I think we're at a good pause point here. Thank you so much, everybody. Again, reach out to folks on LinkedIn if you have other questions. This direct link is probably the best way to go. So if we already applied, when can we expect to hear feedback? I do not know the answer to that question, but I know that generally everybody will. There will be some kind of communication. We are all active, developers and deliverers of work, but we're not on the HR side. So
usually it's within a week of application, usually. So I'll just say that with your application.
That's right.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate you spending the time and hanging out with us. And have a great night and look forward to meeting some of you soon.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.